I've been calling it anxiety for years, but the more I think about it, the less that word actually feels like it explains anything. Because it sounds too clean, like it's a thing you can point at, something you can diagnose, manage, fix, move on from. But that's not really how it feels when you're in it. It doesn't feel like a condition. It feels more like a background process that never fully turns off. Not always loud, not always even noticeable, just there, sitting underneath everything. And then something changes, not something big, usually something small, almost stupid in hindsight. A new situation, a conversation you can't easily leave, a place you don't feel fully in control of, something where you just can't step out whenever you want without it being awkward or noticeable, and suddenly it stops being background, it becomes the main thing. And I've tried to figure out what actually changes in that moment. Is it the situation itself, or is it just exposing something that was already there the whole time? Because if it was only the situation, then it should stay consistent. But it isn't. It shows up in completely different places, completely different contexts, and somehow it feels like the same thing every single time. Same pressure, same scanning, same sense that you're slightly trapped in whatever is happening. That's the part that doesn't really make sense to me, because we talk about anxiety like it's a response to something, but half the time there isn't even a clear something. It's just a feeling that something isn't right without being able to explain what that right would even look like. And that makes it even harder to deal with than an actual fear, because fear at least has an object. This doesn't always have one. So most of what I've done over the years is just try and manage it. Not solve it, just manage it enough so I can get through situations without it taking over completely. Breathing techniques, trying to stay present, telling myself it's irrational even when parts of me don't fully believe that in the moment. Sometimes praying as well, not in a deep or structured way, just talking to God and asking please not now. And sometimes it works, or at least it feels like it works, but I don't know if it actually changes anything, because nothing really gets solved. The situation just passes and I survive it, which sounds like progress, but it doesn't always feel like it. Because afterwards, when everything's fine, there's this strange gap. Nothing happened, nobody noticed anything, the world didn't shift, but internally it felt like something serious was happening the whole time, and then it's just gone. And I'm left trying to understand what I was even reacting to. That's where it starts to mess with you a little bit. Not the anxiety itself, but what it implies about you. Because after a while, it stops feeling like something you'll experience and starts feeling like something you aren't handling properly. Like other people must have something figured out that you haven't. Like you've had enough time to outgrow it and you just haven't. And then without really deciding to, your life just starts adjusting around it. It's in dramatic ways, not in obvious ones, just small, quiet adjustments. You start avoiding certain situations without fully labelling it as avoidance. You start choosing things that feel more comfortable, even if you don't admit that's why. You start delaying things until you feel ready, even though that feeling never really arrives in the way you expect. Strange, because from the outside, nothing looks different. But internally, your world becomes slightly smaller. Not all at once, just enough that it's harder to notice. Just enough that it still feels like you're living normally. At some point, I started wondering if anxiety is even the right explanation for any of this, because it sounds like fear, and most of the time, I'm not actually afraid of anything specific. More like a system that reacts before there's even something to react to, like it's preparing me for an exit before I've even decided I want one. And that's where it gets a bit uncomfortable to think about, because if it's not just fear of situations, then what is it? Is it fear of being stuck? Is it fear of not having control? Or is it something even more vague than that, like just discomfort with uncertainty itself? I don't really have a clear answer for that, but I've noticed something. The more I try and get rid of it, the more central it becomes, because everything I do starts to orbit around avoiding that feeling, and then my decisions aren't really about what I want. They're about what I can tolerate without triggering it. And that's where it starts to quietly take over your life more than you realise. Not because it's intense all the time, but because it becomes a thing that you organise your behaviour around without even naming it. There's this idea I came across through Viktor Frankl, that people can endure almost anything, even extreme suffering, as long as there's some sense of meaning attached to it. But when that meaning starts to disappear, when suffering feels random or unnecessary, that's often when people start to break down. Not because of the pain itself, but because of what the pain represents, or more accurately, what it doesn't represent. And I think something similar happens with anxiety. It's not just a feeling that's hard, it's that it feels disconnected from anything useful, like it's happening without a clear reason, without a clear purpose, without a clear endpoint. And that makes it harder to sit with than something that at least feels justified. So naturally, you try to remove it. You try to outthink it, outbreathe it, outdistract it, out-escape it. But the problem is that the escape becomes a pattern. Because every time you leave a situation because of it, even mentally, even subtly, you teach yourself that the situation needed to be escaped from. And the next time, the reaction comes earlier, quicker, more automatic. It stops becoming something that happens during certain moments and starts becoming something that prepares you for moments before they even can exist. And I don't think you notice that shift while it's happening, because it doesn't feel like a big change, it just feels like you're being careful or sensible or aware. There's this scene in Fight Club where pain isn't treated like something to avoid, but something to stay with. And the idea isn't that pain is good, it's that constantly trying to escape it might be what actually traps you inside of it. I used to think that was just a dramatic way of looking at things. The more I think about it, the more I realise the point isn't intensity, it's attention. Because whatever you keep organising your life around ends up becoming the centre of it, even if you're trying to avoid it. So the question starts to shift slightly, not how do I get rid of this, but something more uncomfortable, like what have I built my life around avoiding? Because if your main goal becomes never feeling anxious, then you start filtering everything through that lens. And slowly, without noticing, your choices become less about direction and more about avoidance, less about expansion and more about control. And that's where it gets a bit harsh, because nothing obviously breaks. You don't fail, you don't collapse, you just don't move in certain directions as often as you could have. And I don't think the answer is to try and eliminate it. That feels like the wrong target, because the more realistic thing I've noticed is that it doesn't really disappear, it just changes how much space it takes up in your decisions. And maybe progress isn't becoming someone who doesn't feel it, maybe it's becoming someone who stops treating it like a signal to stop everything. Someone who can still move while it's there, even if it's uncomfortable, even if part of you is still scanning for an exit, not because it's gone, but because it's no longer in charge of the direction you're going. I don't fully live there yet, but there are these moments where it doesn't decide for me, and those moments feel different. Not peaceful, just less controlled by it. And maybe that's the closest thing to progress there actually is. Not silence, not certainty, just not building your life around the need to escape your own mind.